Hello, welcome to the first episode of The Modern Millennial, where we talk about issues affecting millennials. It's our debut episode. And today's topic, autism. I'm aware that a lot of people our age are getting diagnosed as adults. That's actually what happened to me. I was diagnosed as being autistic 3 years ago. I have ASD type 2, which means I'll need substantial support for the rest of my life. And that's a lot to hear, especially as an adult. You kind of mourn the person you could have been. I went through like a period of being really bummed out about it. But, since then I've come to, it explains a lot of things, first off. And I've come to embrace it in some ways. So my name is Eddie. This is Cody.
Cody?
Yeah, and my story is I was diagnosed 3 years ago after being misdiagnosed numerous times as a kid. They thought I was bipolar when I was like 10. And then again as a teenager. They couldn't really figure out what my issue was. Like, I did very well in school, but I had issues tying my shoes. Weird things. I was even called an idiot savant by a few teachers, but yeah, like, it wasn't until my sister, who works with autistic, she's a teacher, she teaches autistic kids. She said, "Mom, Ed is autistic," and I was. How do I put this? I was resistant to that at first, but I didn't know much about autism. But the more I read about it and the more I talked to my parents, I realized, yeah, this might actually be me. A big telltale sign was, as a kid, I wouldn't breastfeed, I wouldn't latch, you couldn't pick me up. I had issues tying my shoes, putting lids back on things. Info dumping was something I always did as a kid. That's where you tell someone everything you know about a subject that's important to you. And I would do that all the time. But yeah, that diagnosis kind of, obviously it changed my life. It was really upsetting at first. I felt like I had to relearn a lot of things, I guess, and learn patience with myself, which I've always not the most patient person in the world, but again, I assume that's tied to my neurodivergence. But yeah, that's my story. Again, I'm only 3 years into the diagnosis, so I'm still navigating my way through life, which isn't always the easiest thing, but I would recommend anyone who does think they have autism not to diagnose themselves, but to get properly diagnosed by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Yeah.
You told me the other day you worked with autistic kids. What was that
Yeah,
like?
at one point. It was good. A lot of these kids were nonverbal. Some of them could be very violent, but it was good. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. Yeah, it was interesting. And Cody, you've told me that you think you may have autism. What's your story?
Basically, I don't know enough about it to know whether I have autism or not, but I've been told that I sometimes display traits of autism, and so that's why I wanted to ask you about the different traits. Like you told me, info dumping is one of them.
That's a big one. I mean, there's lots of traits. It's a very broad spectrum.
So when I think of info dumping, I think of, in a conversation, the idea that two people are going to be roughly sharing the airtime in the conversation. So one person's talking, other person's talking, and if there's a mismatch, if one person's talking more, that to me is the idea behind info dumping. Is that
Not really. Info dumping is when, and it's more common in children, but I still do it. So if I'm talking to someone, I may take over the conversation if the subject is something that's important to me. And there I will tell that person everything I know about that subject, whether it be a certain band, a certain kind of music. As a kid, I would tell my aunt everything about the last movie I watched that I like. You know what I mean? Everything I knew about Star Wars, I would tell my mom, all in one giant information dump. I think that's what it refers to.
Right.
But
And is that problematic?
it can be as a kid, I think. Well, it can be as an adult. People think you're trying to take control of any conversation when that might not be it. It's just, your lack of social awareness. And I'm sure your lack of communication rules as well.
So having control of the conversation can be a problem?
Not control, but just taking over the conversation. Because the other person might think like, well, I want to talk about something else, or I might want to add something.
Right.
But this person has taken over the entire conversation.
So in a normal conversation, there's a variety of topics. That's the idea?
No, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. But what I'm just saying is, like, when it comes to info dumping, an autistic person will tell everything they know about that subject if the subject is important to them.
Right.
And that's more common in autistic children. But that's just one trait. I mean, there's many. Not being able to be picked up, not breastfeeding, having issues following instructions, whether it be oral instructions or written instructions.
Does that make it hard to have a job? Because
I think, well, it depends on how you learn. I think if you can figure out how you learn best as an autistic person, you'll succeed. But there's barriers. But you just have to figure out your way around those barriers. For example, I'm not the best. Like, as a kid, I discovered I wasn't the best at following written instruction. But if I was given visual instruction, I did much better.
would you say Elon Musk is autistic?
Yeah, he's definitely has autism. Yeah, but I'm not going to say that autism is the reason why he's Zig Heiling and stuff. I mean, I'm autistic and I've never Zig Heiled.
Right.
But just judging by his mannerisms and I've seen him on Joe Rogan info dumping about stuff that he's passionate about. He seems to lack a filter, which is just a huge trait. But also not only like a verbal filter, but he's got these weird tics as well, which I have too. I do things with my hands often, and I don't even know I'm doing them. But yeah, I would agree that Elon Musk definitely is on the spectrum, probably knee deep in that spectrum.
So are tics a trait?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Now, saying that, your tics could also be the result of something like Tourette's or something, but I think there is an overlap too of Tourette's and autism. Autism usually always comes with something else, whether it be dyslexia, ADHD.
It's paired.
Yeah, it usually comes with something else.
Really?
Most yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know. That I don't know. I think that would be an awesome question for a guest at one point.
So does that mean that they can't diagnose them separately, or they just naturally form together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they are diagnosed at the same time. But dyslexia, I think you're more likely to have dyslexia, apparently, if you are neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent just means anything that's not typical, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Neurotypical.
Yeah.
Matters of the brain. So people with ADHD, ADD, and autism are considered neurodivergent.
Right.
Because the way they process things is different than the normal person. Excuse me. Need more coffee. Yeah. So tell me a little more about the things that make other people think you are possibly on the spectrum.
Well, when I was doing stand-up comedy, or when I do it, socially, I find the atmosphere of being around other performers, especially in the comedy like realm or world, is a little bit hard to navigate because I can't always tell when people are joking or sarcastic or like doing a bit. So it borders on like bullying or goofing around with someone and making fun of them. And so when I'm around other comedians or even in places I've worked, if I'm goofing around with someone, sometimes it comes across as weird or like not socially acceptable because I'm either trying a bit, I'm goofing around, and I sort of naturally move towards hanging out with people like that are a little bit more free thinking or
I think that's why we connected.
comedic. And so sort of like when I'm around people that are, I would call neurotypical, sometimes they just don't understand that I'm trying a joke or that I'm doing a bit or that I'm just experimenting socially. And so I've had comments like, oh, you're acting weird or stuff like that. And I don't know if it's just bullying where some people will just go right for like, oh, you seem autistic. But I've just had comments made about my comedy or the way that I interact with people that strikes people as autistic-ish.
Yeah, I think autism has been a catch-all though for weird behavior.
It's a catch-all, yeah.
And like people diagnosing themselves, that's not right, in my opinion. You need the proper diagnosis. If you're autistic, you need that clinical diagnosis by a professional.
You need a professional diagnosis. So does it start, like you must, even to go into a doctor's office and ask for a diagnosis, like you said, your sister tipped you off to it, but
and my mom.
There's got to be a motivation to even go and ask. Like something is going to be.
Yeah, the motivation was like as I got older, I didn't do well with a lot of types of personalities, passive aggressive namely.
What does that mean?
Like I didn't do well with passive aggressive people, sarcastic people. I preferred communication up front and direct.
What's passive aggressive like for you? Like what does that mean?
Passive aggressive?
Give me an example.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I was late for work and my supervisor wouldn't say hello to me all day or make eye contact with me.
Right.
That's passive aggressive. Instead of just being straight up like, hey, you were late for work, just try and work on it. But instead he's giving me evil eyes but not saying anything. To me, that's a great example of passive aggression.
Do you think that it's common for the authority figures to be the source of that trigger? Like in autistic people or even just like, because I've had issues with quote authority figures in my life as well, and I don't know, but I kind of thought that was
it's funny that you mentioned
sort
that
of a male thing.
No, I too have had issues with authority figures.
That's pretty common though, isn't it?
I think so. I don't know how common that is in autism. That's maybe something for a different episode, but yeah, that's a really good point. Give some other examples of traits you have that others may think are autistic or on the spectrum.
I don't know any of the traits.
Do you like to be touched by strangers?
Yeah, I don't mind. It doesn't bother me.
Really? Yeah, I don't like it when strangers hug me or someone I just met wants to give me a hug.
Right.
Or someone I work with who I'm not that close with wants to give me a hug. That's weird to me. And I tense up.
Oh, I know one that I feel like isn't neurotypical. I don't like the sound of people chewing.
Okay.
Like,
yeah. You get irritated.
Like nuts or chips, things like that.
That could be a sign too, because autistic people, I don't do well with beeping noises, especially if I'm concentrating on something or working. I don't do well with really bright lights, but I still don't do well with really dim lights.
Right.
And autistic people are often
Just realized I didn't turn the light on.
sensitive to sound.
Oops.
And sensitive to noise.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
So the other one that I'm always curious about is ADHD because the idea that a person wouldn't have enough, like a deficit of attention, so not being able to focus on a task for long periods. And you just mentioned that autism sometimes gets grouped with other.
It often comes as something else. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So how does it work in terms of attention, like focusing on a task with either ADHD or autism, like for you? Like is that part of it? Is it difficult
I
to...
excel. Like when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. And I can ignore everything outside of that. Like when I was a door guy and
Right.
stuff would go sideways and it was, someone was getting aggressive and they'd take a swing at me, which happened so many times during the pandemic when I told people to wear masks or told people they couldn't come in if they didn't
Yeah.
show their COVID, whatever. So when someone would swing at me, everything would slow down in slow mo. Like I'd have time to tie my shoes. Like I was in the zone.
So you didn't have a deficit of attention?
But if it's something I'm not in, like, but I did as a kid because they first diagnosed me as ADHD and then they misdiagnosed me as being bipolar when I was like 10 and then again as a teenager because I was I had really bad, and I still don't have the best emotional regulation, which is a huge sign of autism. Like to this day, I broke both my arms in August and it didn't hurt. I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't even make a noise, but if I lose my keys, I'm in tears. Or if I lose my cell phone, I'm in tears.
So when you say emotional regulation, is that like you feel an emotion and then you don't know what to do with it?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And sometimes can get the better of you and take control of the situation.
Right.
Whether that be sadness, anger, frustration,
Right.
even happiness. I don't even and I suffer from crippling anxiety, which is another telltale sign of autism. When I worked in film in Vancouver, I had an issue with a superior who wasn't that nice to me, and every single day I'd have to pull my car over and dry heave on the side of the road, or puke if I ate breakfast that morning, but I generally don't eat in the mornings. Yeah. And I never knew that feeling in the pit of my stomach was anxiety. I didn't know what it like. My parents even thought I had like stomach issues. They thought I might have an ulcer. You know what I mean? But I didn't know that the dry heaving was anxiety. And like now it seems so obvious, but I didn't know what anxiety was. But now I do. Now I'm very familiar with my anxiety. And I still have problems regulating it. But do you suffer from anxiety, Cody? Coach Fuchs?
I have a very extreme view that is a bit offensive to some people. around emotions because I've been experimenting or trying to figure out what exactly emotions are, and at some point I came to this theory. I'll call it a theory because I'm still working on it. I'm not saying that I know this stuff for sure or anything, but my theory, or that I tried to work on, or that I'm working on, is that emotions aren't real. And that triggers people. I know that. I get that that's a hard concept.
I disagree.
Yeah, most people
I think
disagree.
They're so real to me, man.
And my only reasoning is that when we have thoughts, human beings produce thoughts in our brains, that each thought can be understood as an emotion. And so my theory was that psychology, modern psychology, came up with this word, emotions, to describe different types of thoughts. I know it's extreme, so you don't have to accept it but this is just my
Yeah,
thing.
but it goes beyond a thought, right? Because when I'm upset about something, I can't concentrate on anything else. And a big thing with autism is fixation. Fixating on things. Fixating on an emotion. Fixating on a TV show. Fixating on a character. You'll often meet high-functioning people, well, so they used to call it Asperger's, who obviously have autism, but are, have an high IQ, or are high-functioning, but they often are very passionate about a certain show, whether it be maybe an anime show, very passionate about the characters. They'll know everything about that show. And I find that's a common thread with a lot of the high-functioning autistic people that I've been in contact with. There'll be one thing that they're really, one or two things that they're really passionate about. And for me, it was music growing up and film. And I ended up studying film at the U of A, and I ended up being in bands and collecting so many records. And I have an encyclopedic knowledge of the bands I'm into. I can tell you, when the first Clash record came out, or the first Sex Pistols, I could tell you how many labels they were on originally. You know what I mean? But then again, I can't remember where I left my keys last night, that kind of thing.
So how would someone know the difference between the autistic version of, you're talking about memorizing a huge number of things in one subject, and just someone that's into one subject, or even a professional that's doing it day in and day out? So they obviously are going to memorize, a lawyer is going to memorize huge amounts of data about law. But they might not be autistic. That's just what they're doing. They're hyper-focusing on one subject every day.
Oh, definitely. But how passionate are they about that subject? And often...
If you become a lawyer, you're obviously passionate about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Autistic people often excel at organizing things, putting things into boxes. As a kid, I was always amazing at figuring out how much my hockey cards were worth. Even as an 8 or 9-year-old, I could, look at the price guide, figure out what set. Do you know what? And I always liked organizing things. Another big sign is when I'd have Smarties as a kid. Before I ate them, I had to separate all of them into their colors first, into groups, and then I'd eat them. Eat purple, red, you know what I mean?
My understanding of that type of behavior is that it borderlines on OCD.
Definitely.
Okay.
And remember when I said that autism usually comes with something?
Okay, so OCD and autism go together?
Very often.
Okay.
I've worked with autistic people who have OCD, crippling OCD.
Right.
Where they have to close every door. The chairs have to be a certain angle before they can leave the room.
Wash their hands all the time.
Totally.
Yeah,
Touch every door handle on the way out. So yeah, OCD is another one that is often compounded with the autism. Definitely. Do you have OCD traits, Confucius?
I can't think of that many. I play chess. I sometimes people think that that's like an odd behavior is to play chess all the time. I paint. I draw.
Are you into trains?
Not into trains.
Okay, because that's usually
Like I like
a
riding
giveaway.
on trains.
Totally, but
Yeah, yeah.
not
But I don't collect
train
them or
sets.
anything.
Okay, yeah.
I did collect cards when I was a kid.
And were you good at organizing them and knowing what set you had, what year?
Yeah, I memorized all the Marvel cards and baseball cards that I had, and I was a little bit too old for Pokemon.
Yeah.
When Pokemon came along, I was babysitting my cousin.
Yeah.
So I memorized all the Pokemon, but there were only like 100. And I did that just so I could communicate with my little cousin about it. So I wasn't obsessed with it at all.
Like, I'll give you an example. When I was 8 or 9, huge wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Loved pro wrestling. Could tell you the entire lineage of the Intercontinental title. I could tell you who has it now, who had it before,
I had
when they lost it.
I had a bit of a wrestling phase,
But could you?
I wasn't obsessed with it.
Okay.
No.
See, I would know all this stuff and make it my business to know the title history.
Yeah.
When Hulk Hogan won his first championship from the Iron Sheik in 1984. Like, I still remember that. And I'm not... One day I just stopped liking wrestling about 9 years ago, 10 years ago. I just woke up and was over it, which is so weird.
Would you ever consider the idea at this point that you were misdiagnosed with autism and you have OCD?
No.
Okay, so you're pretty like committed to this concept.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I have ASD type 2, which is...
But you were misdiagnosed before, so you're aware that it happens.
I was misdiagnosed in the late 80s and early 90s, right? And then when we didn't know much about autism,
Right.
like, I don't think they even call it Asperger's anymore. And I, like, again, like the
But my
teachers...
question is, misdiagnosis in your mind is like, it happens, and it's not, like it could happen again in this case. It's not...
Yeah, but I trust the diagnosis. I mean,
Okay.
this is a professional, and like she's accredited.
The bipolar wasn't a professional?
I think that was I don't know if that was a school therapist or a family doctor. But again,
you're
but this,
sure it was misdiagnosed.
But well, yeah, because we know so much more about autism than we do in the late 80s, early 90s when I was misdiagnosed.
So what bipolar traits are you
I think
sure
it was
that
my-
you didn't have? Like,
I'm not bipolar, like, because she ruled that out, and
what was the evidence? Like, what traits don't you have that they said, oh, he doesn't have this, so he's not bipolar?
I think it's the change in mood, the sudden change in mood.
So you don't have sudden changes in mood?
No.
Okay.
No, it takes, but I'll be really one way for a while and then another way for a while, but not with constant changes.
So the emotional regulation, that's more on the autistic side?
Definitely. And I think that's what they confused.
Not the
as being
bipolar side.
bipolar. Exactly. They confused it. Like, to this day, again, as I was saying, I broke both of my arms in August and I didn't flinch. Even as a kid, I broke so many bones, never cried. But if I were to lose my keys, or if I was to be told no by my parents that I couldn't do something, I'd break down emotionally.
Do you want to talk about that or no? Because you brought it up twice.
Yeah, okay. Because, well, a big thing is never being able to accept no as a kid and throwing a lot of tantrums. And like having
Interesting.
immigrant parents, they get pretty frustrated pretty quick. And I think my parents feel guilty now about how they might have handled some things, but it's not their fault. They didn't know. And I was a handful. I was a redheaded handful.
This is a very interesting topic because, like, you might know from the stand-up comedy community, the idea that parents use corporal punishment or hit their kids is a very common theme in, like, when you talk about childhood trauma. That's the example that always comes up. People say, like, well, did your parents hit you or didn't they? Like, you're either in the I was hit as a kid group or I wasn't hit as a kid group. And it seems to be this common thing of, like, you know, were you a bad kid? Were you a good kid? Did you have bad parents? Did you have good parents?
No,
and you're bringing up the immigrant.
I had good parents.
Yeah,
like, they were old school though, right? They're Irish old school immigrants, and in Ireland too, in a lot of Europe, matters of the mind are very taboo up until recently. I mean, my mom didn't know what autism was until probably the mid-90s.
Yeah, the generations don't follow that.
No, and my parents were old school. Like, you
Yeah.
go to church, you behave, you be respectful to your elders.
Yeah.
You know, and my mom would give me a whack in the grocery store if I was acting out.
Right.
But I mean, I don't want to throw my folks under the bus. They were amazing, and they worked really hard.
That's fair.
And they had nothing.
Yeah, it's good to be grateful for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's. I mean, it is a challenge having an autistic kid. I'm sure it's amazing as well, but there are challenges. You have to be prepared. But again, if you don't know, you're upstream without a paddle. You know what I mean? Like,
It's got to be really hard to have an extremely autistic kid that's either nonverbal or, like, displaying a trait of autism which is just completely extreme.
Some of those kids end up in group homes, right, where the parents can't really take care of them.
So how do you factor that in? Like, you seem like a very what do they call it? High functioning.
I am.
So does that make you feel different from other autistic people? Because you're not.
Yeah, well, again,
it's not limiting you in terms
spectrum.
of.
You have autistic people with a very, very high IQ, and then there's autistic kids with a very low IQ.
Right.
And then again, they might have something else linked to the autism, another learning disability.
Right.
But it's a broad spectrum. I'm sure you have autistic people with an IQ of 70 as you do autistic people with an IQ of 130.
And I don't understand this exactly, but can you have a neurotypical person that has a low IQ as well?
Of course.
Okay, so you could be pretty typical, like no brain disorders at all, nothing that's neurodivergent.
No, and that might be...
And you just aren't very smart.
But it might be another learning...
That's a thing?
It might be another learning disability.
Right.
It might be something else. But
so part of IQ is usually a condition. Is that what you're saying? Like, usually if you're low IQ, it's because you have a condition? Something that's
it could be.
preventing
It
you
could be
from-
something developmental. Like, for example, what's it called when your parents drink? What's that called?
Oh, fetal alcohol.
Alcohol syndrome. Yeah. That often results in the brain doesn't fully grow, right? So it biologically stunts certain things, which ends up in a low IQ.
Right.
But again, like, I'm sure you've met dumb people who are normal people, and you've met extremely intelligent people. It's just...
Phone call.
No, it's an alarm.
Okay.
Oh, we got to edit this out.
We don't have to edit it.
Yeah, we should edit it.
Why? I don't edit.
He doesn't edit.
We don't edit.
So let's keep going.
All right. We're almost done anyway. So we've covered a lot about autism. Do you want to talk about mental health generally, or do you want to keep diving into
I think mental health is going to be a theme of a lot of our episodes.
True.
But I think we'll take that as it comes. And
Yeah.
there's certain issues all that link to mental health that we will talk about in the future.
Yeah.
This first episode, though, was something I think we were both interested in.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Totally.
Especially because, like you said, it's a catch-all. The word autism or autistic, it's like it's everywhere now. People use it as a joke. They use it as an insult. They use it just.
It's better than the R word.
It's better than the R word. It's like more compassionate sounding, but the tone that people use, the meaning behind it is the same. It's like used as a negative thing, whereas in the case of Elon Musk, I mean, that guy's doing fine. So it's not, having autism doesn't necessarily make you like less successful or.
Oh, well, I disagree when it comes to Elon Musk, because Elon
I
Musk's
thought you might.
parents were rich.
I'm trolling. I'm trolling you a
They
little
own
bit.
what mine do they own? They own what are those called?
Diamond Mine.
No.
Emerald.
Yeah, something like that.
he had an
but he
emerald
comes
mine.
from wealth.
Did you know his dad married his stepdaughter?
I didn't.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So
They don't talk though. They're not. They're estranged.
And there's a lot of something common with high functioning autistic people, especially men, is failure to launch.
Right. Yeah.
They're not able to fly out of the nest, so they end up having to live with their parents. I don't, thank God, but I know a lot of middle-aged autistic men who.
Well, Elon didn't. He's launched.
Yeah, but again, he had the resources, right? It'd be a lot different if he came from a single mom trying to raise 5 kids in the northeast of Calgary.
There's lots of rich kids that become drug addicts though. Just because you're rich doesn't make you like successful necessarily.
No, but it definitely opens a lot more doors, man. You have access to better education. And again, what they say here, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And
You know what?
rich people often know a lot of people.
You know what? Of all the things that Elon's done that are negative, the thing he did recently that really drives me crazy is he lied about how good he was at a video game. He got a pro video game player to play an account for him so that he could look like he was one of the top players on the server.
Yeah, that's something else.
And they caught him because he was playing live and they were watching the way he would move the mouse around the buttons, and they're saying, these pro gamers are going, if he was actually good at this game, he would never move the buttons the way he would never use the mouse on these buttons the way he's doing it, because it's the slowest possible way to drag items basically. So they caught him because he wasn't playing the way a pro gamer would play.
efficiently as a pro
Yeah.
gamer. Huh.
Yeah. So he's a liar. He's a video game liar.
Yeah, he's a lot of things.
But anyway, I love the space program, so I can't hate on him all the way. Like I
Well, there is things about him. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
He's
Anyway,
in a tough position.
Yeah,
'cause-
this episode's going to end up being about Elon Musk and not about autism.
If he's autistic, then it's a natural subject to discuss, because a lot of people, when they talk about autism now, he's the example.
Yeah, but there's got to be better examples. Why not
I'm sure there
Rodney Mullen, the guy who invented the language of skateboarding,
Is
the
he
modern
autistic?
language? Yes.
Okay, Rodney Mullen's great.
He's the greatest skateboarder of all time, man. Invented the kickflip, the heel flip, the shove it.
That'd be a good debate for another episode, is who's the greatest skateboarder of all time.
Sure.
I would love to have that debate.
Rodney Mullen. But anyway, I digress. There's many examples. I've even heard that Kubrick was autistic. Same with Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
2 of the greatest directors of all time. Who?
Do you think art has a connection?
Yes.
What is that? How does that work? Because I'm a painter.
Self-expression. And being able to communicate your emotions through your art.
One of my favorite painters is Basquiat, and he was really well known.
Andy Warhol's apprentice in New York.
Yeah, apprentice maybe is a strong word, but they were
He was only
they
a
were
teenager,
friends.
though.
They were friends.
But he was only
But he was already a successful guy.
Right,
when
he was
met
amazing.
Like he didn't learn from Warhol necessarily. He partnered with
No,
him.
but I thought Warhol took him under his wing.
Kinda, yeah. You're right. No, it's a good way to put it. Just apprentice to me makes it sound like he taught him.
And the cool thing about that was like, I think Basquiat brought in urban art, like graffiti,
Yeah,
all that
that's
hip hop related stuff.
Yeah.
And Warhol totally embraced it.
So one of the things they say about Basquiat is that he would paint very fast, and that was one of the ways he could learn quickly and produce art quickly. He was sort of fearless at just putting paint on the canvas, or he used pencils a lot. Like he used different tools too, not just paint. And so, but he was fast. And one of the things Warhol said about him is that he's faster than me. Like he was intimidated by the fact that he's faster than him. But so how does that relate to autism for you? Like, are those traits of autism? The fact that he could hyper focus on painting for long periods, or that he wasn't listening to like what other people were talking about?
He shuts it out. Yeah, that is 100%. Yes.
Interesting.
And doing things for hours that you're passionate about. Huge sign.
So is that like what makes Elon a good businessman in a sense? Is that he's not, even though people criticize him constantly, he's not letting it in. He has tunnel vision.
I don't know.
Kinda?
He just, again, he's a good businessman, but he comes from wealth, right?
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have those opportunities had he not come from wealth.
Yeah.
But anyway, like let's, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, back to art. So as an artist, you think that it gives you some kind of advantage to be able to hyper focus and maybe isolate yourself socially so that you can stay focused on a task. If you're surrounded by people in a project, you can be the leader because you're not listening necessarily to criticism as much as a neurotypical person would.
Sure. I don't know how about how much autistic people like being in control of stuff. I think that probably varies too, but
I thought control was the thing, like that they control conversations.
yeah, that's a good counterpoint. I don't think it's a matter of control though. They just, again, it's that lack of social awareness that, hey, maybe it isn't fair of me to take over this conversation. They're not really aware of those defined social rules.
Yeah. So as an artist, that can be a good thing. If you're trying to focus on your art and there's all this criticism from society that's trying to influence your art, but you're able to block that out because you're not even really perceiving it.
Well,
and you can then focus more on your art and go in the direction you want to go.
the best art has no rules. Look at Basquiat again. That
Right.
or Warhol, pop art.
Yeah, no rules.
No rules.
See, no rules on our podcast. This is the No Rules podcast.
Brought to you by the Modern Millennial podcast.
The
So-
title, we're going with Modern Millennial, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's going to wrap up our first episode.
All right.
We hope everybody likes and subscribes, depending on what medium you found us on, whether it be Spotify, YouTube. Make sure you're here for the next episode where we talk about issues affecting the modern millennial. And Confucius, do you want to tell them about today's sponsor?
We're sponsored by these microphones, Hollyland microphones. We love them. They're wireless. They're easy to use. You just plug it into your iPhone. You don't even have to set it up. They just turn right on. They have a magnet that clips to your shirt. I mean, they couldn't be easier to use. Don't you agree?
They're amazing. And the sounds are like, I don't even know I have it on me. Yeah, they're great. And again, like, you could use these for podcasts. You could use these for if you're making a film, if you're a low budget film director.
Yep.
You know, hide these in someone's wardrobe. You're set. Mm-hmm. Easy to use.
Very good microphones. Thank you, Hollyland.
And thank you, folks, for listening to The Modern Millennial. Episode 1 is in the books.